Does anyone have any issues they'd like to bring up? I have one that we can use if no one else does, but I want to just see. So raise your hands if there's anything that you're either having trouble with or that's in the news and you want to understand better and you'd like to talk about. Okay. Paul.
Well, I'd be delighted to answer anybody else's question. But while you're thinking about questions, I would also like to offer you an update on our ongoing conversation about combating phishing and mail break-ins. And an interesting PS to the story I told recently at TUG about another case study that brings in some extra dimensions. And it was Rich Connolly that got hacked, and I would like to tell you that story if you're interested. But let's ask for other questions first.
So I've been my text messaging, which periodically for the last couple of years would get bad text messages that are trying to get me to sign on a link or something like that. But as of about the middle of March, it escalated quite significantly where I was getting 1 or 2 a day. And I am, if that's appropriate, I'm more than willing to share those with you to see what you can glean from them. They all seem to come from different numbers, but they all follow the same pattern. And I could share my screen and share, a dozen of those just for general knowledge. But I see that Phil has his hand up, so let's ask him first.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say about that also. But one quick question was that I've been using the built-in into Windows 10 service where it saves to an external hard drive where it backs up to that. And I guess my question is, after doing this for a while, I'm wondering myself if I have a problem with the laptop and I have this saved to the hard drive, how do I restore the laptop if it has trouble? Has anyone had that situation where they've saved it to a hard drive and then they've got a problem with their primary computer? Do you need a second computer or a friend? Just go to a friend.
No, well, in my experience, Phil, unlike earlier backup systems where the external, the files were encoded in various ways and you needed the software to extract them and recover them. With the current file history setup in Microsoft, what it's writing on the hard drive is actually just the files and the whole file structure. You can actually open that thing and you just find files and folders. So you could restore them on a different computer just by dragging and dropping them.
Okay, so it's that simple. And I guess the other, is that sufficient? Using the built-in one, is that sufficient?
Is that, well, that's a subtler question.
All right.
I guess that I don't look at that very often because I try not to trash my files.
Right.
But if that's all it's doing, then you're not getting time-stamped copies of earlier things. So it's just basically keeping a mirror of your file system. So if a file gets corrupted and you don't notice that, and then for a while, and then the corrupted version gets backed up in the external drive, and then you want to to try to find an earlier version that wasn't corrupted, that could still be a problem.
Okay. Oh, thanks very much.
And by the way, some of these other backup systems, real backup systems, do keep time-stamped copies of older things, and you absolutely can work your way back.
There are a number of Windows software packages. I'm not very familiar with them, but just for sharing an experience, Apple has a thing called Time Machine, which is pretty automatic, and I can go back and I have multiple time-stamped versions of all the files. As much disk space as I have, I can go back a year or more to pick a particular date and update just the file or update the whole thing. It really is quite easy and transparent, and you plug in a hard drive, or you plug in where you can even use another computer to store it on if you have one on your network. It works quite well, and I've been saved a few times on minor problems because a file got corrupted, or I can't find it, or I lost it, or whatever. So it works well, and I would guess that Microsoft, that Windows has a number of software packages that would do similar things. It was pretty unique when Apple first came out with it, be that complete, whatever, 10 years ago, whatever it was. But I would guess by now, does anyone on this call have experience with Windows backup packages?
Yeah, I mentioned one I used for years, and also at the church I was doing the IT. It's just a simple one, and the free version is fine, or if you want more bells and whistles, you can pay. It's called 2 Bright Sparks, and the 2 is the digit 2. And you could look into it, and it does what Tom was saying and what I was mentioning, and of course, if you keep too many timestamp versions of files, you run out of space on your external drive. But you can tell it how many to keep and how far back to go and so on and so forth. But it is nice to be able to recover, and it doesn't just make full copies of things. I mean, typically these systems look for changes of timestamps on files, and it only backs up the files that changed recently. So it does a full backup called a level 0 backup when you start. And then maybe once a month you get to program it, to configure it. And maybe once a month it does a full backup. And then each day in between it just does incremental backups. So it only backs up the things that changed. So, and then again, the copies are actually just plain files, but the extra information allows you to sort of chain your way back to get any particular day's worth of files if you need to restore that way. This is the typical strategy which has been used in file backups since the beginning of time.
Time machine just if your space fills up, it deletes the old. It asks you first, but it deletes the oldest one. And I have a 2 terabyte external drive that I allow 1 terabyte for this purpose. And generally, I keep more than a year's worth of the incremental backups. Yeah. It's usually like 14, but when I have to delete something, it's usually like 14 months ago. That's the case. Mark has his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say for those who aren't thinking about it that we're talking about file backups here. We're not talking about backing up your whole hard drive, your whole system. That's a harder problem. Backing it up is easy. Restoring it is a harder problem. So what we're talking about is your own user files, your documents and things like that, your photos, whatever it may be. Those are the ones that are most important because you can always get a new system or refresh your system or get a new computer. What you can't replace is your own personal files. And that's the highest priority for your backups. The 2 Bright Sparks, it's not called 2 Bright Sparks, but I want to echo the recommendation. That's the name of the company. What is the name of the software? I can't think of it.
Yeah, I forget.
But I used it. Paul, do you remember what the actual name of the software is?
I'll look it up. I forget. I haven't used it for a while.
Yeah. Anyway, it's good. It's good partly because it's something that helps you to figure it out. It's user friendly. Sorry?
Is it SyncBack?
Yes, SyncBack.
SyncBack, yeah. And then SyncBack.
And it's really quite well developed and it's very good.
Yeah,
it will not back up your whole system. It's a file backup, so it's for your personal files primarily. You can back up some other stuff, but you can't use it, I believe, to back up, at least the free version. You can't use it to back up your entire system and expect any restoration. So, okay.
Okay, Rick Smith?
Just to follow up, what I do is I bought my past few laptops at Best Buy, and I have the the warranty and all that. So they loaded some software, and I can't think of the name of it, but I have a Seagate external drive, and I can use their program. But I do a complete backup every Saturday. I do it at an off hour. It does take a few hours, but I always have complete backups. And I will say that one time when my hard disk crashed completely, I basically brought the computer back to Best Buy and said, they couldn't do anything with the hard drive, but they took the device, the external drive, and we were able to set up a new computer, a new laptop with everything I had, all my files, so I didn't lose anything. So for me, that's my comfort zone, that I at least have a full backup. I do it once a week, so in case the hard drive crashed completely, they can kind of get a new computer set up for me.
Alejo.
So as I get older, I think about what is it that I want to keep that my children might want to look at. And somebody once mentioned to me a long time ago that if humanity lives long enough, then we'll be faced with this question of deciding what history to store, because time can last forever, but there are only a finite number of atoms in the universe, so we can only store a finite amount of past history. Yeah. So my question is, what strategy do you guys have about deciding what to keep for posterity and trimming your essential information so when you're no longer around, whoever you bequeath your data estate to, they can make some sense out of it? This is what I'm thinking about currently.
It's a real challenge. Even if you just talk about photographs, or if you talk about videos that you might have that are worth keeping, so much of it is trivial. I used to, years ago, video, when I first got a video camera, Disney parades, if we were at Disneyland and all, but that's not really important. It was a nice memory, but that's not really important. It's the kids at different ages, but generally it's all mixed up, and it's quite a manual effort to just pick out the important parts and save them for somebody. So it's a real challenge to do a good job at this.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that's finding this a difficult problem.
Yes, I haven't come up with a good solution for me anyway. Mark, did you want to say something about this, or did you have another?
Yeah, Al, you should ask your kids, and I predict you'll be pretty disappointed. But
They don't know much.
But speaking just on my own, from my own viewpoint, this is a tough problem, but I think that the basic answer, and I'm sorry to say it, the basic answer is there's very little that your kids are going to want to see. Now, photos, I'm not speaking of photos. Of course, everybody collects photos. And if you could make a small collection of good photographs, now that might be a legacy thing. Beyond that, and again, I'm telling you my own viewpoint, I have some paper, things from my father, and the ones that I value are when he wrote down personal statements that were from the heart and documents that represented milestones in his life. Frankly, there's nothing else that's important. When we die, most of what we've done just goes down the drain. And my father, for example, did a tremendous amount of very creative engineering work. There, when he did it, it was contemporary, but it got obsolete. And I inherited a lot of those files, and they have no value because the time it takes to understand them and then conclude that they're really old stuff, they lose their value. And the same goes for other kinds of work. So if you have something to say to your descendants, then say it and preserve it. But if it's just the accumulations of your life, frankly, nobody cares. They want to care, but they won't end up caring. So my advice is, don't worry about saving too much. Save a few, very few important things that are from your heart, that are personal, and the rest doesn't even count.
Mark, well said. I actually tried out your question on my eldest daughter, and she said, "Dad, I quickly have to go and do something," as I was explaining all the things that I could leave for her. So you're absolutely right. And looking at my own personal history, my mother had collected thousands, tens of thousands of photographs. But when she passed away, I only kept 2 or 3.
Yeah, and that's like the biggest point. If you pass on a great big overwhelming jumble of stuff, no one is ever going to use it or deal with it. If you have big file cabinets full of papers, nobody's going to know what to do with them. And they're going to sit for 20 years until somebody finally gets up the nerve to discard it all.
Steve Arley, you're laughing and you have your hand up.
Well, I think Mark's comments are spot on. I think back to the things that I saved from my parents, and there are only a couple of very special documents and photographs. I love having their citizenship papers. That is very, very meaningful to me. But I think information like that is a little bit like your furniture. You may think that that break front that you have is just wonderful, or the piano in the living room. No one wants it. That's the reality. One qualifier I would put in, though, and I think it's important, and we've talked about this at FIG, it's important to leave a good financial record, however. Have documents and make sure that your children know where those documents are in terms of all of your assets, all of the contacts, where the important papers are kept. And that's the kind of thing you probably should update maybe every 3 to 6 months, or at least once a year, update it. And so, God forbid, when you pass on and they say, oh, gee, what do we do now? They will have a guide that they will find very helpful.
Yes, and even before you pass on, sharing with your spouse, really important. I highly recommend sharing your passwords with your spouse. I mean, sharing access to them, not using the same password, but give your wife access to your passwords and make them self-explanatory. Don't make them obscure with where she won't know what the password is for. Make it explicit, because if you die or if you're disabled, she needs those things. And it's just as important as powers of attorney and all the rest. So
You may actually want to share it with your kids too, depending on the relationship you have with them, because
Yes.
most of us, our spouses are about the same age. And I love my wife and she does many, many things, but she is a real novice when it comes to using computers and things. So even if she has access to the password, she wouldn't know what to do with the sites when she got to it.
absolutely.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct on that, Mark and Tom. And part of our financial instructions that we leave and that our kids know about is a list of all the important passwords, so that they know how to get into various accounts. And of course, they could help my wife on that as well.
Okay, next is Paul has his hand up again.
Oh, yeah. Well, in terms of saving things for our descendants, there are actually two conversations going on here. One is the short term. How would you hand stuff off, tomorrow if something happened to you? And but the other is the long term one. And it's like the furniture. Your kids don't want your furniture now, and they don't want your records now. They don't want your photos now. But the irony, of course, is that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, they suddenly might become interested in that. Just like Mark was suggesting that maybe he wished he had more information from his father, but it's too late. So, and I would, that's always been true between generations, I think. But the problem is accentuated now because most of our stuff is electronic. And it's just magnetic spots on disks, on media that won't even be readable 2 decades from now because technology moves on. So even if you wanted to preserve all of that stuff so that somebody could look at it, when Mark says save a few photographs, I hope he's talking about actually printing them out so there's a paper copy, because those JPEG files probably won't be readable. Even if somebody, is on a memory device, a thumb drive or something, those things will, boy, that electronic stuff will vanish really quickly.
What I wish is that somebody would develop an application that helps you to go through your files and find old formats and update them to at least what's current. And then, if this type of application was popular and they kept updating it, it would continue to be useful as time goes on.
Yeah.
So one option, by the way, though, is if you store things in the cloud in a place that's reliable. I mean, yeah, maybe Google or something. If you store things in the cloud, when formats change, you could have a pretty good hope that there will be utilities available to convert. And I think that would be a reasonable expectation. So, okay, enough about that.
What Paul mentioned is an extremely important problem in science. I've had over the years with my interactions with the National Science Foundation of how and who should pay for the curation of experimental results, data, because as Paul points out, the formats and the software that's used to process the data changes. And one of the hardest parts of the information technology world is that the software changes and the programming languages change. So keeping data and software current is a non-trivial problem. And I don't think it's been properly addressed either by the research community or the companies who engage in this, because we talked about cryptocurrencies. How long will a cryptocurrency be valuable into the distant future? Because the software that's used to maintain it and process it is undoubtedly going to change or have bugs in it. So this could make an interesting discussion, but I don't know any good solutions for it.
We could go there now, but on cryptocurrencies, there are apparently at least 4,000, and maybe 3 or 4, half a dozen of them will have some life. Most of them are not going to make it, even for 10 years from now. George Cull.
Yeah, I'd like to add to the discussion also that most of the media that we store, our backups and what we want to will to our grandchildren has a specific lifespan. A DVD typically has maybe, well, they quote 10-year, but I'll probably say you probably can get it out to 20 years. Magnetic tape has a lifespan. Hard drives, again, a similar lifespan problem. And when you go and then also, well, as Paul and everybody and Mark has said, you have the problem of can you still read the media? I know I have my PhD thesis on the old linear tape drive reader that I don't even know if anybody out there has a linear tape drive reader available. So
Not many of us.
you probably have to go to a museum to find to be able to read it. But again, there are always hackers out there who like to have old hardware and keep it working. So I'm pretty sure if it's a media problem, you can find somebody if you really try hard to read it. But again, the fact that it has a finite lifespan is another big issue that you need to be concerned about.
Okay, Jim Blinn.
Yeah, considering what you want to pass on to your family, one of the things that I discovered was that there are some books out there, old-fashioned books that you write in that are called like A Father's Legacy or A Mother's Legacy. And they have questions that they ask you about your life growing up and important things that occurred in your life and so forth. And those are the kind of things that if you write down that kind of thing, as I was doing that for my son, I realized that I wish I would have had that kind of information from my parents, because now I'm thinking, well, what would they, what did they do? What it's kind of thing when you're growing up, you don't care, and in fact, you probably don't care until you get fairly much older. But then you start thinking, well, gee, what was the story back then? But I never thought to ask the question. And these books tend to ask you lots of questions that you might want to pass that information on to your kids. So, and you do that actually using a pencil, or well, a pen would be better, I guess. And hopefully it's a good one and it won't fade too quickly.
But as in so many things, those books very quickly, it's certainly better than nothing, but they get out of date for covering some of the, it's current at the time that it's written, but things are changing so fast that it's hard to have a printed document that's going to include everything that you might want to include. Just, it's another problem.
Right. Just whatever, the old adage that something is better than nothing.
Yes, no, I'm not disagreeing. Just recently in the last week, our digital identity goes on without us, because just within the last week, I have a cousin-in-law who passed away 3 years ago, and I just got a Facebook notice asking me to befriend her. So I don't know why that happened. And then in addition to that, I had a boss for 17 years when I worked, who I was very close to, and I knew his family quite well. And his wife passed away probably something like 3 years ago again. And I got a notice to wish her a happy birthday. So these things happen, and I don't know, cleaning up after yourself or setting yourself up so that some of these things might go away if you like them or using them. I don't know. No one pays much attention to that, but they're still out there. It's just within the last week I got 2, so I was reminded of it. Anyway, Mark is next.
I'm interested in your friend request from your 3-year deceased cousin.
Yes. No.
Did you accept it? And are you going to talk to her?
No, I didn't. I get a lot. I am on Facebook. I don't use it a whole lot, largely because my kids are on and their relatives, and it's good for some things. And so I don't spend much time with it, but I do get these requests and things, and I don't accept them unless it's somebody that I actually talk to and things of that sort. And I haven't seen or talked to her in quite a few years now. So no, I didn't accept it. It would be interesting, but then it would take time and I'd be chasing it down, and it's probably not one of those things that I want to spend my time on. Mark.
Yeah, I wanted to agree with George and also mention that I had never realized that even media like a hard drive deteriorate even when you don't use them.
Yeah.
I thought that if you're not using it, it's going to have a long lifetime. That's not really true. They can still deteriorate. They sort of rot. I mean, maybe not in every case, but you can't depend on digital media to just sit there and be inert. Things happen, even aside from the interface. And also don't store them in the basement. Put them in a good climate. So I just wanted to mention that.
Probably not the attic either. Paul, you're next.
Well, yeah. Well, a couple of points. Just picking up older threads here. I just wanted to mention in the area of doing backups. Yes, we were talking about data file backups, and somebody mentioned backups of their whole computer. And just for anybody who doesn't know this stuff, there's a software package called Acronis, which is particularly good. And one of its backup modes is to actually make up a byte for byte copy of your entire hard drive on an external medium. So that, yes, if your disk totally crashed, you could just plug in a new disk and run the restore part of Acronis, and it would completely create a brand new disk. I mean, this is what you would do also if you just wanted to if your disk was starting to go bad and you wanted to replace it. Obviously you want to do a complete copy. So look into Acronis. I don't know if it's got a free version. It's probably a limited time free version, but it's not very expensive. And they have other backup modes. And another point about backing up Windows PCs, Windows 10 these days really tries hard to get you to use their current preferred backup method, which is to the Microsoft cloud. In fact, it's annoying. You can't even turn it off, and it's slow, and then you can't figure out whether the file you're talking about is actually on the cloud, their cloud drive, or your hard drive. You can't find stuff, and it's confusing, and it's typical Microsoft. You can't understand what's happening all the time. So you can tell I'm not a Microsoft fan. And then, having said that, would you like to hear this new a testimonial, a short postscript to the email hacking saga?
Sure, but we have one more hand, which is Griff. Let's see
Learn
what.
from you.
Sure.
Griff?
Seem to be open. Well, I can't tell too much about what options you have on Windows, but if you happen to be using Apple, don't neglect the Time Machine backup system. It has saved my ass so many times in the last 15 years. It's saves everything once per hour. It keeps a complete image of what your system looks like so that it can be put back together. And I have on 2, maybe 3 occasions had my machine's disk fail, or had the machine itself fail. And since I had the time machine backup, I was able to get everything that had been on the machine as of the time of the failure restored onto my disk, and I was back on the air within a couple hours. What I do now is I have external hard disk. I think they're 2 terabyte disks. And I just turn the time machine system on. For my laptop, I only back it up when I've made some major changes, because I really don't have to have the most recent copy. But for my iMac, which is my basic machine, I've been able to put the thing together nearly perfectly 3 or 4 times in the last 15 years.
My machine has a good reputation and seems to work well. I support that. George, your hand is up again.
Yeah, one of the things, and actually this follows on to what Griff was saying, is to partition your whole system. For example, put the operating system on one disk, which you boot from and run it from. Usually I use a solid state drive for that. And then for your user space, I go ahead and put that on another separate disk drive, not partition, but a whole separate disk drive, and then split that up into active data and inactive data, so that is also split on different drives. And in a way, it's making sure that if you have, for example, a system failure or an upgrade to a whole new operating system, you can easily just drop that in without affecting the other parts of your data. And it's worked pretty well. I've been able to go from Windows to Linux to Mac with pretty successful migrations on all cases. The other thing I'd like to point out is that NAS storage is another option. The prices of disk drives are coming down, and it's now feasible for a person to put together a complete NAS drive where you have your own cloud storage at home.
NAS stands for?
Oh, yeah, okay. Network Access Storage.
I mean, it's basically like an external hard drive, although usually it's more than one. It's like a whole disk array. It's a fancy thing.
Right, and it uses RAID, where you can have one disk failure. It's hot swappable, so you can pull that disk drive, put a new one in, and it reconfigures on the fly. It's used quite a bit for people who have mission critical software that they don't want to lose, or and don't want to move it up to the cloud.
You know, one thing we're not mentioning at all is organization. And that's a big topic. And how to organize what's on your computer. That's, I mean, George just sort of started to mention it, but a lot of us are people who don't organize. And a lot of us are people who do. And I think that it's like Democrats and Republicans. I mean, we're really different people. I mean, I'm an organizer. You probably could predict that. But the techniques of where to put things and what to call them, how to develop categories, this is a very big subject. And we can't even begin it right now. But it's important, because if you just have a big jumble of stuff, then if we get back to legacy for a minute, your legacy is going to be unmanageable. People have enough mess of their own. And if you give them a mess as an inheritance, they will not, they'll treasure it. But in the end, they'll never look at it. So then what's the point? So, okay.
Okay, we can come back to Paul, but I noticed Rich Jaeger has his hand up.
Jaeger.
Jaeger, sorry.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Tom. As a technology user, I would call myself aspirational rather than experienced. Listening to the discussion, I'm picturing that something I still have to do would be a good thing. Get an external hard drive and put my files on there. So the question that was coming up to me, assuming I'm not storing my operating system and the various programs somewhere, but I have my user files on an external hard drive. And by the way, I have Windows system. Logistically, how does one go about getting the operating system, the software, reconstituting that, and then reloading my files from this external hard drive? Is there a relatively simple explanation that somebody can give the aspirational technology user here?
Well, I can tell you that I had my Windows system organized something like that with the intention was that all the personal data would be separate. It was not simple. It really wasn't. I'm sorry to say that. It was not a simple matter. In Windows, if you want to move your My Documents over to a different drive, there are lots of consequences. And you have to do it the way they let you do it. You can't just do it any way you want. If you do, it's going to be messed up. So I hate to say this, but you're adding a lot of complexity. And I'm not sure that it accomplishes anything. Why do you want two drives when you can have one drive? You need to rely on backups, in my opinion. Contrary to what George said, but there's different viewpoints on these things. I would say that you're not gaining anything by having multiple drives. Okay, you're gaining one thing. There's this probability that maybe your drive will fail, right? Well, if either of your drives fails, you're in trouble. That's what backups are for. So my view is you're not gaining much by having separate drives. You can still back up the right stuff, even on one drive. You don't have to back up everything. You can back up what's important. I don't know. Does anybody else want to chime in on this and agree or disagree?
I tend to disagree with that in that I would say in the past 10 years, I've had 3 hard drives fail. And if I didn't have backups of them, I agree, I'd be up where and not being able to restore them. But again, by spreading the data, I'm spinning at least 10 terabytes of data right now, and as usual, it's almost all maxed out. And what you wind up doing is trying to partition it so that you can do house cleaning and get rid of the data that back up, the old backup data, the old cache data, all the stuff that you really don't need to be spinning anymore.
Okay, Rich, your hand is up again?
Oh, sorry, I guess it's
Oh, you
still
just didn't
just
take it
up.
down? Okay.
Yeah.
Alejo?
I just wanted to reinforce what Mark just said. I've learned an awful lot from my secretaries. I've run some moderate-sized organization with hundreds of people, and I noticed that my secretary was able to keep track of what I should be doing and what my department head should be doing. And I often observed what kind of filing system an organization they used for their filing system. And this goes back to the days when computers had small memory, so their filing systems were physical in filing cabinets rather than inside the computer. But the organization of your information and your life can have a very significant impact on how easy it is to maintain and evolve. And in fact, some Turing awards have been given on how to organize data. You may have heard of the relational model of databases that sort of revolutionized the database industry. So and there's a personal aspect of how do you organize your data so it's easy for you to maintain. But if you have a whole collection of people who are also accessing that data, and this time we're talking about, or I'm talking about your children and your spouse, you have to consider how they view the data. So this might make an interesting discussion of good ways to organize data so it's easy to maintain and evolve.
Would at some point in the future you like to share your thoughts on that at a TUG meeting? Because we could certainly arrange it and then discuss it.
Well,
you don't have to answer me now, but I mean, we are looking for those kind of things and we need something to get us started. As you can see, once we start talking, we usually all have a lot to say, but sometimes it's hard to get started.
There's a lot of collective wisdom there. I certainly don't have the unique right answers to this, but I'm happy to share some of the experiences that I've had,
Well,
that I've learned from my secretaries.
Yeah, I think that might lead to other ideas and other thoughts and questions from others and some other alternatives as to how to do it. I think it would be a profitable discussion. Sometime I'll get back to you on that. Okay. Paul, now, so we have your update.
Okay, so first let me say from Al's remarks as he was talking, it occurred to me there's a new kind of relational database we're talking about here, and it's a database for our relations.
Oh.
So anyway, so I wanted to just tell you a little bit about this, the most recent hacking story of an old Guardian. So it's Rich Connolly, and he's usually at TUG meetings. He's not here today.
I don't think he's here today.
So it was last Saturday morning. I was sitting at my computer, having my first cup of coffee. It was probably like 8:30 or something, 8:45. And suddenly I'm hit by about 4 emails all at once. My computer bings, so I go bing, 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 bing. And what's all this mail coming in? And there were 4 copies of the same email. And all these emails were from Rich Connolly. And every copy said, hi, do you use Amazon? Do you order from Amazon? So, and I looked, the two, I have different versions of my email address. So, I could see immediately that this was a typical scam like the ones we've talked about forever here. But, so I knew instantly that Rich's mailbox was hacked. I could tell the email came from his mailbox. It wasn't the other kind where they just sort of pretend to be you. Came from his mailbox. So I called him immediately. He picks up immediately. So within a minute of this blast email going out by the scammer, I was talking to Rich, and I said, Rich, you got to immediately go and change your password, which is the first step always in these things. And you've heard us say this. So he said, okay, just a minute. I said, I'll wait on the phone. So he does this. So I thought, well, that should nip it in the bud, right? Because now the scammer is locked out. But so then I sent an email to him after he changed his password, and he didn't see it. And then I get an email back from him, but it's really from his hacker. So first of all, and he uses Comcast email, okay, and same as Xfinity, and it's an older mail system. So the first thing I learned is that just changing your password, at least with Comcast, does not lock out anybody else. I also, so the hacker.
Yeah, but I know why. Because they were on at the time, right?
But this is the point I'm getting to, Mark.
Yeah.
This is the point I'm getting to. So I did see, I talked him through, we saw that he had created an alternate mail service that with the same kind of name, except at a different service, and put it in the forwarding slot. So we deleted that. So I thought, well, you've heard me talk about this. So the scammer can take the scam off of your computer and still carry on, nurturing these victims and getting them to send you money or gift certificates. So, so we deleted that, and I sent an email to him, and again, I get an answer back. So clearly, changing a password does not knock the guy off. He's still logged into the email account. He's sitting there, managing the replies from his victims, who are Rich's friends and relatives. And I'm thinking, well, how is he seeing these emails if Rich is looking at his email and he's not seeing them? But of course, he's not actually looking at his inbox all the time. So this hacker was still logged in, and he was reading these emails, and we were watching. And then finally, Rich says, "Oh, look! I just saw an email from you," which I had sent a few minutes earlier, and it was in my deleted mail folder in my trash. And he said, "Oh, and there's one from me there too." So the hacker was quickly deleting these emails as we were watching and replying to them and deleting them, but failing to empty trash. So that allowed us to sort of watch him a little bit. But after a while, he started emptying the trash too. So this went on for some time. And at one point, he says, "Oh, there's an email in my trash from my niece." And she's replying saying, "Oh yeah, Rich, I could help you out. What's up?" And I said, "Well, maybe she does what I do, and she likes to play with these people and pretend she's a victim." He said, "No, she's not like that. No, she's a real victim. He knows her." So I said, "Rich, you got to call her." So I'm staying online with him, and he has a second phone. So he calls his niece and says, "Look, the email you just sent, that's, ignore that. Don't do that. That's a scammer." So we're watching this unplay in real time. But the thing is that we did find not only the overall forwarding setting, but we also found forwarding rules set and all these things. And we kind of cleaned everything up, except the hacker was still logged in, and there was no obvious way. Now, I think with Google and more modern mail services, there is a way to see who else is logged in, or who has logged into your account recently, and where in the world they are approximately, and maybe even a way to bounce them out. And any email service worth its salt, if you change your password, that should instantly disconnect any other device or person that's connected to your mail account, because now they're connected with what's now an obsolete password. But they don't do it. So this went on for a long time, and then finally I said, "Rich, you're going to have to call tech support, because I don't have any way, no way to bounce this guy out of your account, and he's running this scam." So I said, "You're going to have to call Comcast, call their main number, wait on hold and listen to background music." And the first person is going to come on and say, "Oh, I'm very sympathetic, but I'm not the person." So they hand you off to another, sooner or later, you may or may not reach somebody who can help you. So I did that. I said, but he was going to do that. This took most of the morning. We were going through all of this. He said, but I'll Google it and see if I can find a better number than just starting with Comcast's main tech support number. So I Google it, and one of the characteristics at this point was that he changed his password, but he's still not getting his email because the scammer was siphoning it off. And so I Googled that, and I immediately, in the first screen full of hits, about the third one down, was a user forum at Xfinity, and somebody seems to have had exactly the same situation. And of course, other users try to be helpful, saying the usual things, you know, check the forwarding, do this, that, and the other thing. But then about the fourth message in this dialogue was from an employee at Xfinity, and she said, "Have you solved this problem yet? In case not, here's our internal tech support group who handle exactly this kind of situation." And she gave the phone number, and they actually had a little website somewhere. So I called Rich back and said, "Here, call this number." So Rich calls that number, and he immediately gets a person, and the person immediately knows what to do, kicks the guy out, and fixes everything up, and got everything right. So what's the moral of all that? I don't know. I just lucked out. I mean, I'm going to hold on to this phone number in case anybody else needs that kind of tech support at Comcast. But it was kind of fun to watch this thing unfold, watch this guy do his work. Or I shouldn't say he, it could have been a her, right? I mean, you don't want to be sexist about this. So Rich was very pleased. At the end of the morning, he got everything straightened out. Oh, and along the way, there was another one that was amusing. There appeared in his maybe inbox, or maybe he caught it in his trash, and there was an email from somebody that we know who's a member of Old Guard, and it was full of expletives deleted. I mean, really, really shocking things. And at first Rich said, "Oh my goodness, why would he send an email to me like that?" And I said, "No, Rich, he wasn't sending it to you. He thought he was sending it to your scammer." And he was really pissed off. So, but it was kind of fun to watch that go by. I'm not going to tell you who it is. It's somebody you know well.
Interesting how this all happens. To support that, I have an iMac, an MacBook, an iPhone, and a tablet. And I have them all so that my Gmail works with any of them, and I rarely sign out. I mean, I do periodically, but I rarely sign out. So for some reason on my iMac, I don't remember the reason, maybe 2 months ago, I changed my password intentionally. I did it. It wasn't, wasn't that I thought I was scammed or anything. And then I forgot about it. And then I wasn't getting my email updates. I didn't tie it together onto my iPhone or my tablet, which I look at periodically, but primarily I use the iMac for email. And I wasn't getting. I thought this, and then it dawned on me that I changed the password. So it must have logged me out, and I had to sign back in with a new password, and all was fine. But I didn't anticipate it, and I was annoyed because all of a sudden I wasn't getting my emails on my other machines. Yeah. Okay, if no one has anything else, if you want, go ahead.
Tom, I'd just like to say one other thing is most email services provide two-factor authentication.
Yes.
I know Verizon does, which is AOL, and Gmail also provides that.
Yeah, well, now I have two-factor authentication. Do you always have to put it in? I don't remember because I don't think I had. Maybe I did have. I don't know because it's so common. I don't remember if I had to do two-factor authentication on my Gmail to sign into my iPhone or my iPad. I might have because I do that for so many systems that it's kind of like I do it and I don't think about it. But possibly I had to use the two-factor to get back in.
What it does is gives you the option of fingerprinting your device, and will allow you to log in without doing the two-factor authentication.
Okay, maybe I don't remember the specifics. I just remember the reason was I changed my password, and so it kept the old stuff, but it wasn't updating. So I had to re-sign in order to. However, I did that in order to get my Gmail to flow to my iPhone and my iPad. Okay, is it worth, are any of you interested in me sharing some of these texts that I had been, I've got them from like the middle of March, at a much more frequent basis. I got them from roughly the middle of March until the middle of April, and now it's much slower again, and I don't know why, but I was looking at them to try to see some pattern, and I didn't, but if I share my screen, if you guys.
Well, Tim, I get things like that too, but I'm more interested, not necessarily in seeing the ones you get, but in knowing whether it's possible to combat junk text messages.
I don't know.
That's the question I have. Does anybody know?
Yeah, well, I haven't.
I mean, I know how to do it. I know lots of ways to do it with email.
Right.
But I haven't got a clue how you could do that with text messages.
So in fact, the only reason I didn't delete them is because I thought we might talk about them just for.
But does anybody on this call know how to do that? Can you share some information?
It's similar to the email messages, always with a website to go to and always with some sort of introduction, which you don't know the person, but they try all sorts of different things. They're very similar, and they're all at least showing up as coming from different phone numbers. Yeah. And never phone numbers in my database.
And I have a related question for you all too. I don't do texting that often, but some people I know do. That's all they do, And so, but I'm an email person, so sometimes they send me an important message. I don't see it for a while, and because a lot of different impedance here. So, is there an iPhone app that will convert every incoming message to an email and send it to me by email? I can't find one.
I'm not aware of one.
No, that would be interesting if there were.
I know how to send email. I know how to to send email to a certain email address, which will turn it into a text message and go to somebody at one of the major services. Yes.
Well, that's not. I mean, my service lets me put in an email address, and I can send a text to them via an email address. I guess they have to be in my address book, and I have to have the phone number. I've never tested it, but I know I've been able to do that.
I don't have that problem, but I've noticed now. I just got an update on my Samsung phone and the messages, and all of a sudden there's an option for actually finding spam and blocked messages.
Oh.
It's one of these. There's like a search box and the three dots, the typical three dots. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of options, like the starred archive spam and block settings. It just showed up in the last week or two, actually.
I think that was in an Android update, because I just Googled and it shows that.
Yeah, the last Android update, which is sort of a neat thing that I've never seen before.
Maybe Apple will follow suit one of these days.
Yeah, in a year or two when they get around to it.
Yeah.
I don't text all that much, but I do text with my family because that's what my kids insist on using. And I do have probably a dozen other people that do text. So I don't get all that many, but I can easily show it on my Mac. So when I'm sitting at the Mac, I see the texts come in another window, and I all of a sudden was getting more of these than actual regular messages. And now it seems to have been much lower again. Bill, your hand is up. Did you want to add to this, or you have another?
Yes, I did. I haven't set it up yet on my own iPhone, but I think that one can set the iPhone so it only receives text messages from favorites. And if you only have a small cadre of favorite people, a dozen, 15, 20, whatever, you can set it up so it only accepts those and it sends all the other ones away.
You can definitely do that with phone numbers.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that it isn't there, but I don't remember reading about it or hearing about it as far as text messages.
Yeah, I haven't tried it yet, but I thought I noticed that the feature was there to be able to set it that way.
I will try to remember to add as my list of things to look for. But
sure.
if you do find it, I'd appreciate it if you'd text me or email me
Sure.
or whatever, just so that I would at least look at it to be aware of it, because there are pros and cons even for the phone numbers, because I got really excited about that when that came out. We were still meeting in person, so it's got to be at least 2.5 or 3 years ago. And you could set it so that your phone would only ring if the number was in your address book, or if you had called it or talked to it or whatever within the last, I don't know, maybe 48 hours or something of that sort. And
Right.
that seemed like and otherwise it would go directly to voicemail. So you didn't
Right.
get disturbed, and you could check if you wanted. But then, I mean, there are people that I want to, or organizations that I want to talk to. For instance, I'm a blood donor, and I kept getting these emails, but they didn't leave a message, and it never went anywhere. And so there was an appointment that I was supposed to have that I didn't have because I didn't have the number in. So or another time I was trying to get a call back from a vet or something like that, and they called back, and it was pretty serious, but they weren't, I didn't realize that the phone rang because it went directly to
Right.
messages, and I don't look all the time. So there are, pros and cons of all this stuff, but in general, I would like to be able to shut off texts that I think I don't care about.
Great. I'll do that if I find out.
Okay. Mitch.
Yeah, Phil brings up an interesting issue, but we have to not only set things up for our preferences, but we have to react to the preferences of the world around us.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
I get specifically whenever I've got a doctor's appointment coming up, a week, maybe a day, whenever I get a text that says, please confirm the appointment, you have to type in a Y. And and these don't necessarily come from the doctor's office. They come from some larger organization. So like Summit Medical or whatever. So the point is, it's nice to try and filter all this stuff and only have the stuff that we want, but sometimes we want stuff that we don't know we want and can't predict that we want it until we get it. And so
that's the con. That's exactly what I was talking about, that it helps you in many ways, but you may miss things that you really do care about or that are important to you.
Right. And some of these machines, they send you back and say, oh, thank you very much for your prompt reply. And you say, fine. And they say, this thing is not monitored. Get out of here. Anyway, we have to adapt to the world around us to some extent.
Yes, you don't want to shut yourself out and only do things your way. You want to be at least aware that there are other alternatives or other things, that you should look at. It's a delicate balance, and I don't know if there is a right answer, but you try to work through them, and I guess over time they do seem to get better. Mark.
Yeah, on my iPhone, there's what they call filters, and you can select known senders, unknown senders, or all messages.
Is this for texts?
So in the text, yeah.
In the text.
So that can be useful.
Yeah.
Like if you choose to look at your messages through those 3 different selections or filters, then, the known senders are the ones that are in your contacts.
Right.
And the unknown senders are everybody else, like the doctor's office and stuff like that.
And scanners.
That could be helpful if you're having a problem.
Yeah, well, it has the same dilemma that like the phone, is that I might like to limit it to only people that are in my address book, but there are people who I want to talk to, have to talk to, need to talk to, that are not in my address book. And I won't, I wish it then would send me a text or something that I have a message. But it's really hard to come up with the right answer for you.
Right, but Tom, the usefulness of it is that if you're looking in the unknown senders folder or filter, then you know that if you see a message that pretends to be from somebody it's not legitimate. If they're in your contacts.
True. That's a good point.
Then you're finding out that it's not legitimate.
Yep.
So that's, I guess, the main use of it.
Okay. Most of the ones that I've got, that I'm aware that I've gotten that are not legitimate, are very obvious to me. They're not legitimate. I mean, so I don't have any temptation to follow them. It comes from just the fact that it chose a number as opposed to a name. It means it's not in my address book, but most of them are very generic, but trying to be friendly. Like, here's one that I just have up on my screen now. I finally found it, LOL. Was up all night searching for something. This is a text, searching for something that would improve our slugness and lack of focus during the day, and found this. It was featured in Forbes and a few other big outlets. Everyone's been talking about it. I just got one, and I think you can even get a complimentary bottle, but there weren't many left. Go there, and then there's an address. So it's obvious to me that wasn't one of my friends, but but they're all different. They're all following that same pattern, and all of a sudden I was getting, I don't know, 2 a day or something like that. So those would, if I filtered it so that I only got people I know, those would go, I guess, to whatever, and I could go look. But I'm not good about remembering to go look at things like that. And I would only do it periodically. And if it's a hack, it certainly doesn't matter. But if it is something like your doctor's confirming your appointment or wanting to change your appointment or something like that, you wish you had checked a little more frequently. Okay. Any other thoughts? Or anybody else want to add a comment?
I had one comment. Phil Uppersey actually asked me for that phone number at Comcast, so I just put it in the chat for everybody to see. There's my notes on that conversation.
Okay.
And I will just add one PS to that story. And you've heard us say this so many times, but it's always worth repeating. I finally asked Rich, spending the whole morning with him, dealing with this. I finally got around to asking him, since he had changed his password, I said, Rich, would you mind sharing with me what your password was that was hacked? You never know how people get into your mailbox or how they manage to hack your password. Or usually you don't know. So he told me his password. And his password was the 3 digits of his street address. No, it is his 3 initials in all caps. RDC, whatever, Rich Conley. The 3 digits from his street address, followed by capital AVE. His initials and his street address. And I explained to him, Rich, it's a good idea to have a password that does not contain any of your personal information.
Definitely is. No birth dates and no.
There you go. We talk about all this stuff, and yet some of us still have some hackable passwords. So think on that, fellows.
Yeah. Well, and if you make them unique and creative, if you're not using a password manager, it becomes onerous to try to manage it and to keep track of it.
I know. We could do another session on passwords. That's
I have that on the list of things that I'm going to send out to see if I can get somebody to volunteer to lead the discussion on. But I think it would be useful. It's been a while. It's been a year or two since or more since we've done that. Okay. We thank you all for participating and your active comments, and I look forward to seeing you all soon again.
Have a great day.
Take care. Stay healthy.
I'm leaving. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.